Welcome back, you quacks. Hopefully, if things start getting better, we will be known as the quacks or something like that. We'll be ducks or something. Just finished watching a movie right now. Not right now. I watched a couple, maybe like an hour ago, and I was like, let me talk about what I watched because no one cares about my opinion. But here I am to give it to you anyways. Okay. I just finished watching all this Quiet on the Western Front. Man, I finished that on Netflix right now. All Quiet on the Western Front on Netflix. That movie was sad. And I guess it was sad because I never look at war through the eyes of. Yeah, we never really look at war. That's kind of fucked up. We never look at war through the eyes of the loser, but the Germans lost this one in its perspective of a, a, a teenager, boy, a child, however you want to call him. His name's Paul, I think, is the main character, and you see the war through his perspective, and I mean through different people's perspective too. But like he's like the main character you follow, and we always see movies, I think, from other points of view as the winner. And man, this movie was sad because it's about the First World War, and I remember learning about this a little bit in high school, and I don't remember if it was the First World War, the Second World War, where my history teacher said that it got to a certain point where they thought it talks about Russian. He was talking about Russians, not Germans at the time, but about Russians going to war. And in the beginning of the war, well, they weren't Russians, right? They were Prussians, or I'm sorry if I don't remember what they were, but they were like way before Russia, way before USSR. Those people, Prussia, they were Prussia, I think. And how when wars start, they usually send old people, their oldest soldiers, and things are getting bad in war when they start sending off young people because they already went through all of the old people they had to go through, I guess, like that died. And I remember them talking about that, how like towards the end of it that they were just pubescent teens that were going into war. And that was scary because it was like we were in high school. That could have been us in some other lifetime. And it is us in another lifetime. And this movie talks about that. Like, you see, what I understood from it was like, sometimes when you're a guy, like young person, you want to go out and prove yourself in war and stuff like this. And that's what he wanted to do. He didn't, his mom didn't want him to go to war. He's like, you're too young, you're a boy, I'm not saying he was a soft child, but he had innocence, and his mom's like, you won't make it out there for too long. You'll make it 2 weeks, you'll die or something. And he did make it for a long time. He went to war, he fought, and he saw his friends die, and then he became a soldier, and he was under their mentorship. Like, it looks like he was the mentorship of another man, and you see him change from a boy to a man, and you see him lose his friends, and it's sad because the way they're fighting, it's what's trench warfare, and they're fighting to get meters. They would get out of the trenches, fight, and they wouldn't really advance much. There was, in my point of view, there was no way of showing how you were winning. But there's context in like the movie that it shows that they were losing because there's parts where the top generals, the top generals, would go and have meetings with the top generals of the other 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 armies, and they're like, these are demands that we want for you to surrender. And they're like, the more we dwell on this, the more people, the more time we dwell on thinking about this and not signing this peace treaty, the more our soldiers die. And it's kind of showing the last part of the hoorah, like the war. And it'd been like a couple of days already, and they're probably like 2 3 days away from signing the peace treaty. And they show like this major battle, and they go into war, and that's when he loses a lot of his friends. He goes. These people are starving. You know, they're eating like stale bread. You could see like he's taking bites out of like rock hard bread. The only thing that makes it tolerable, I guess, is just because these people are hungry, and it shows that they don't have food. Which I guess, like, I'm pretty sure the director wanted to show this, that in war, I guess the soldiers are the ones that really pay the price, because there's a scene in the movie where one of the top generals is talking to like a lower general or whatever, and he asks him, he's like, so what do you do? He's like, well, my family, I work for my family. My family has a company. And they're like, what is it they sell or manufacture? And they're like, saddles for horses. And he goes, so after this war, it doesn't matter for you because you'll always have a job. That's something that people are going to buy from now on. So it's like equivalent to for someone saying like, oh, you work, your family owns Ford, like cars or computers or something right now that we use that will forever be in fabrication, in manufacturing. And the general that is not the one with the company, he starts talking to the guy, and he's like, well, I'm a general. My father was a soldier, and his father was a soldier, and it's like, and I have not proven myself. I have not won. But this guy's in like this big house. He's got his 2 dogs with him. They're eating like steaks, and like they have an array of food on the table, and it just shows kind of that they're not the ones out there fighting, and it kind of bothers you because it's like you have people out there drinking out of buckets of water with dirt after running into the field, and you see this man and the general or whatever, he has his little wine glass, right? And he's like shaking it around. He sips it, and he's got like this much wine left. And instead of finishing that wine, he just throws it out. Like he empties his cup out into the ground, and then he asks his servant to fill him up again with more wine because he didn't want the last piece of wine. Maybe he had sediments or whatever, but it shows that he had the ability to waste food, and he would give his dogs steaks and stuff like that, while you had soldiers stealing geese from farmers around the area, that you had soldiers stealing eggs and going through hunger. And it showed that the country didn't have enough resources to keep this war going, but they did not want to surrender. And it's sad that the soldiers were the ones paying the price, you know. So they gave him like 72 hours to comply with the treaty, and they did it before that time. They signed the paperwork or whatever, and like the news comes out, they're like, okay, the war is over. Tomorrow at 11 hey, we will finally be, there will be peace. So it it becomes night, and all the soldiers are going back to, like, I guess the house or the barracks or whatever, where they're stationed in tents or whatever, and they're bringing their wound, and they're like, wow, we made it, we're alive. You can see that Paul goes out and looks for his friends, and then he finds one of his comrades, and his friend, he's like, could you believe, his friend got an injury, he's like, could you believe it, I got shot in the leg, and he had a really severe wound in his leg, probably like on his thigh, above his knee. Hours away from having peace, and he's like, and I'm gonna be crippled. And I get it, crippled right now is not a bad word. I mean, it's a bad word now to talk about and whatever. But back in the day, I mean, like, it was hard enough having all your limbs. Now imagine having to work with one less leg. And he's like, I'm a fight for them not to cut my leg off, because in those times, like, there's not that great medical help. They're just chop the leg off. Let's see what happens. And Paul's like, yeah, like, let me just go look for other people that are alive. So he goes around finding, and he finds his like mentor of the whole war. He's like, can you believe it? We're alive. We're good. And then they go and they find food and they start eating. And then they bring back food to their friend. And the friend goes, oh, great, you guys brought me food, right? And this had been like probably like another 2 hours. And I think like he had been just sulking in what his future was going to be. And he's like, yes, did you bring utensils? Which is kind of weird. Like, who needs a fork and a knife and a spoon to drink soup? Just drink it from the cup or the bowl or whatever, right? It's water. And yeah, he's like, yeah. So his two friends give him the food and everything, and they're kind of sitting him up. And I don't know, they're not paying attention. Paul looks over, and he sees the soldier there just staring at him eat. So everyone else doesn't have food. It's just these three guys. And they get distracted for a little bit. And then Paul's friend, the one that had the wound on his leg, just gets a fork and just starts stabbing himself in the neck. He just starts stabbing, and he kills himself. He ends his life. He's like, he really didn't want to become crippled, but I don't think he saw a life after that. And in the fight, in them trying to stop him from doing that to himself, you saw the soldier that was making eye contact with Paul, and he stood up from where he was. He came and he stole his soup. And it just shows like how at the ends of their life these people were, that like some dude was taking his life, doesn't matter, I just want my soup. Someone else came and stole their soup. I don't care that your friend lost his life. I don't care that he committed suicide right now. I just wanted some soup for myself. And it's these hardships that these people went through that pretty much they in their eyes it was for nothing. So the next day comes, and they get their orders. New soldiers come in from wherever they were coming in. They were being brought in by truck. Oh no, they go and they steal some eggs from a farmer, and then the farmer's kids end up shooting his mentor, and like his mentor dies, and he's like having this like existential crisis where he's just like, we were done with the war, and now just because we were hungry and we went to go steal food from this farmer, they had already stolen food throughout the war. He had been getting food stolen from him. Maybe not just from them, but they like Paul and his friends had at least stolen like a goose from the guy. And so his mentor dies, and then when his mentor dies, they get rounded up and they go in front of that general that, was feeding his dogs steaks while his troops didn't have anything to eat. And he's like, pretty much goes like, hey, these yellow bellies signed a treaty and we're surrendering. And he's mad. He's like, these people are giving away your country, this and that. But we're going to fight one last time before 11. Before the clock hits 11, they're going to fight one last time. So it's like 9. No, so it's like 10:30 when the announcement was given. They go to the front of the line at 10:45. And at like 10:50, they start rushing the trenches of the other soldiers, and they're fighting. And you see Paul, and it looks like he's gonna die because he gets in a fight with I don't know, a French guy, I guess. And the French guy looks like he's got him. He's really gonna get him. But he manages to take his helmet off, and he beats his face off. And he's like, whoa. So then they jump into the trenches, and he fights another guy, and he's choking him out. Paul is choking the guy out, and then the guy somehow flips him over and throws him in the mud, and he's pushing his face in the mud, and he's suffocating him. He's drowning him in the mud. But somehow Paul just does this maneuver where he pushes them, and then they fall into one of those bunkers that the trenches have around them. So now it's this guy and Paul, the French guy and Paul, in this bunker, and they're fighting to get a gun to kill each other. And in the shadows, a French guy comes out of nowhere and stabs Paul. And they're just looking at each other, and the Frenchmen leave, and Paul just starts walking out of the trench. And it's like, there's a noise, and they're like, oh, it's 11 o'clock. Peace. And he could have survived if it wasn't for the other greedy mofo who didn't even join the battle at all. But this all could have been prevented, really. And at the end of the scene, the end scene was this redheaded kid that had come in with the new troops. The commanding officer that was talking, I guess, to the general, tasked him to start getting the tags from the soldiers who are dead. And it kind of repeats, I didn't talk about it, but what was the role of Paul when he first got into the trenches, that he was doing the same thing. And it just kind of shows a full circle, that what was it all worth, It's a really sad movie. It was literally minutes, probably 5 more minutes, and that guy would have lived, and he would have lived a good life. He probably would have lived and been able to go visit the wife of his mentor, his wife and his children, or he could have gone back to his mom and told her, see, I survived war, but he didn't. I mean, I guess that's all. I don't know what else. It was a good movie. It was sad. I know I just spoiled it for you guys, so spoilers alerts. But it's worth a watch. Besides, we know they lose because it's a historical movie. Peace out. Comment, like, and subscribe. Bye.